All right, we're coming in hot. I got the payload ready to go.
All right, I'm flanking you from behind.
Everything's looking good.
Oh boy.
What is it?
You got a bogey on your 6.
Evasive actions.
Okay,
Evasive
I'll
actions.
I'll take care of it. Combine. Here we go.
Good. Keep him off me.
I got him.
Okay. Dropping the payload.
Go for it.
Solution. A direct hit. Yes. All right.
Okay, hey everyone.
Hello.
This is Ashkahn.
And I am Graham. And today's question is, I was looking at all the stuff attached to my float tank and wondering if the order that the filtration equipment goes in matters. Is there a reason that the pump is coming before the filter?
Okay. Yes.
There totally is.
Yeah.
Thanks for your interest.
Yeah.
Don't mess with that yourself, leave it to the professionals.
Yeah, like, are you going to be rearranging it? What's going on here? These things are generally placed in a specific order, and you typically see them in the same order when you look at not just float tanks, pools, spas, hot tubs, all that sort of stuff.
Yep, and it's totally arbitrary. There's actually no reason for that. It's just everyone kind of
one dude did it the first time, and everyone's been doing that.
No, that's not true.
All right, so here's how it goes. You guys ready?
Yeah, lay it down,
okay,
Papa
great.
Khan.
So, basically, the water is being sucked out of your float tank at some place, and often the first thing you see is the pump. Sometimes the only thing you see before that is that little like strainer basket thing. Sometimes these are connected to pumps. Sometimes they're plumbed as a separate piece. They're called hair and lit pots or leaf traps or all sorts of different names like that.
Depending on whether they're used indoors or outdoors, I guess.
And that's basically, to catch big things so that they don't go through your pump and the rest of your filtration system. So that obviously wants to come
earplugs,
before the
pine
pump.
cones.
Yeah, they're like leaves and rocks are what they're used for in other settings. So that's kind of the first thing in line to try to grab big stuff, as makes sense. And then usually the next thing you see is the pump. And pumps, they're kind of forces in a suction side of things. Like they're sucking water in is kind of the way that they're doing things, and that force is pushing it through the rest of the system. And so they typically don't like to have to suck water through too much other stuff. So as a result, you usually see the pump be the first thing, so we can get the water moving and push it through the rest of the system.
And I was also surprised at that when I was first learning about the order of things, because it really seems like you'd want the pump after the filter, if that's at all possible, right? Like, it's like a big hair and lint trap, right? Like throwing the pump after the filter, if you can, just means everything's getting filtered before it goes in there, less chance of things getting stuck.
Less hair specifically going in.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, that's not.
It just seems to put a little bit of strain on the pump if it has to suck through a filter media or something like that.
It's like sucking out of your glass through a really long straw, right? Like it's just not as
with a piece of cotton at the end of
it.
So you have the pump. Sometimes you have the hair and lint trap if you have one of those. Then it goes the pump. And then often what you see after that, if you have a flow meter, is the flow meter. Certain flow meters really want to go directly after the pump. Other ones want to go in different places. Other ones don't care about where they go. But that's kind of the most conventional place you see it, is right after the pump. You see, if you have one, a flow meter. And then you get into the actual, at this point, like all that's happened is we're moving water. And if you have a flow meter, you're seeing how fast it's moving. Like that's all that's going on so far. So now we're actually getting to the point where the solution or the liquid is being cleaned in some way. And basically you have two different types of cleaning. You have an actual filter that's filtering physical stuff, hair, skin cells, oils, things like that. And you have some sort of treatment system that's dealing with microorganisms. And
UV, ozone.
Right. Killing things like E. coli.
Bromine feeder or something like that.
And so generally the way that you see it is that treatment system goes after the physical filter. And that's just because you want your treatment system to be kind of as effective as it can be. And so if you're trying to treat the solution before the filter, then you're trying to kill all sorts of stuff that is just about to be caught in a filter. Or it's kind of dirtier than it needs to be. The hair can obstruct, and oils can obstruct things like UV penetration. The chlorine can be eaten up by trying to get onto all that stuff, hydrogen peroxide, all that sort of stuff. So it's kind of like, okay, filter first, get as much of the gunk that the filter can stop out of the way before we start hitting it with kind of these treatment systems to deal with these different microorganisms. And then at the point that you're there with the treatment system, depending on what you have, you kind of want to do things in different orders. So often if you're using UV and ozone together, people like to put the ozone in before the UV system because, if there is any hydroxyl radicals being formed from the ozone and the UV interacting, then you'd obviously want the ozone in the system when it's in the UV chamber. So that's kind of the method they'll go about doing it. If you have chlorine or bromine that you're using and you have a UV unit, a lot of times, mostly what you see is people putting in the chlorine or bromine after the UV because UV can actually eat up some chlorine. So kind of ideally what you're doing is hitting the UV and then injecting it with chlorine so you're not kind of diminishing the chlorine you're putting right into the system.
Yep, and I think that actually the chlorine and bromine feeders tend to go the very last in the system. Almost regardless. Like that's kind of the last thing that you want to happen at the end of all the equipment.
Which makes sense because they're a residual, right? You kind of just want them out, mixed into the whole thing, doing what they're doing out in the whatever, pool, spa, if it's in a float tank, in the float tank. That kind of logic, I think, makes a little bit more sense for pools and spas where there's actually a big body of water that needs a residual.
It's not getting
kind of
sucked back up immediately 3 minutes
exactly.
later. Yeah.
But, that's the general idea. You want to filter everything, then you want to put the chlorine in so that it's not being used up by anything else as it's passing through the system. So even things like heaters, a lot of pools have heaters, some float tanks have inline heaters, will often go before injecting chlorine and bromine. And, in kind of most float tanks, that's pretty much all the equipment, and then it just plumbs right back into the system.
Yep, that's the bulk of it. I was trying to think of some joke of something else you could catch on there, but nothing was coming to mind. So I guess we can just let it slide this time.
So yeah, I think that's generally the order. You have the pump is the first thing with maybe something before it to catch big objects. The flow meter typically after it to kind of track how fast the liquid is moving. Then you're doing the physical filtration, try to kind of do a first pass, get a bunch of gunk out. Then you're doing your treatment system in a specific order depending on what combination of things you're using. Then you get that right back into the float tank.
All right. And if you have other questions, shoot them over our way. Go to floattanksolutions.com/podcast. And I mean you, if you're listening to this, you go over there right now. You go over there and you send us a question.
That's right. Yep, you know who you are.
You heard us. Because with them, we can keep going and answering them daily.
Yeah.
And we'll be back here tomorrow with another one for you.
That's right.
So watch out.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Bye.
Bye, everyone.